So, the NBA trade deadline has now passed, and while moves like Nikola Vucevic to the Bulls and Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets are getting quite a bit of attention, today I want to talk about a few smaller moves that maybe aren't getting as much attention, and just see what they mean. So, the first move is a trade between the Portland Trailblazers and the Toronto Raptors, with the Raptors getting Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood, and the Blazers getting Norman Powell. So to talk about the Blazers first, they get who I think is the best player in the deal, a 20-point per game scorer in Norman Powell, who is a solid defender, and then offensively is a really good shooter and someone who can attack the rim, something that they might be lacking a little bit. Powell, his ability to attack the rim will be really beneficial in Portland, because sometimes Damian Lillard gets doubled and then they swing it around and they're just looking for a 3-point shot and no one's really driving and kicking. But Powell is someone who can attack right off the catch and put pressure on the defense, and that's going to be a really good thing for the Blazers. That's something they need. Powell is a bit smaller. He's only 6'3", though he does have a massive wingspan. So I'll be interested to see whether he starts with Dame and CJ or whether they bring him off the bench, and then if he's in their closing lineup. But they get a really good scorer, someone who can put points on the board and makes their offense even scarier. Like Dame, CJ, and Powell, that's a lot of offensive firepower, and it's going to be tough for teams to defend. And then for the Toronto Raptors, they get someone in Gary Trent, who's a young player. Powell and Gary Trent are both going to be free agents this offseason. Powell has a player option, but he's going to decline it most likely. But the Raptors get Gary Trent. He's a restricted free agent, so they can match any offer. He's a really good shooter, 6'5", solid defender, but he can also create his own shot off the dribble and hit mid-range shots. He's not as good at attacking the rim as Norman Powell, but he's someone who can definitely fit in Toronto. Give them just more shooting and more spacing, and then be a solid defender. And they also get Rodney Hood, who's sort of in there to make the contracts work, but Rodney Hood's always a player that I felt is a tiny bit underrated. He's just a solid NBA player who's a good shooter, and he stepped up in the playoffs a few times, so another good NBA player for the Toronto Raptors. So I think this is a good trade for both sides. The Blazers sort of make a more win-now move, getting the best player in the deal and another scorer. And then the Toronto Raptors get a bit younger. They don't have to pay Norm Powell in the offseason, and instead they move forwards with their younger guys and Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. Okay, so the next deal is between the Hawks and Clippers. The Hawks get Lou Williams and 2 second-round picks, and the Clippers get Rajon Rondo. If we talk about the Hawks side of things first, they get Lou Williams, who, maybe you could provide some scoring off the bench. He's a very good regular season player. I don't know how much they want him playing with Trae Young, and he certainly doesn't solve any of their defensive issues, though they have been better defensively recently. But we'll see what happens to Lou. He gets to go back to Atlanta, can provide a little bit of scoring off the bench, and they get the 2 second-round picks, which, you never know, second-round picks, just little sweeteners in the deal. And they also get off of Rajon Rondo's contract, who it didn't really work out in Atlanta for like the 2 months he spent there. And the Clippers, they get Rondo, and this move could go two ways. He could just be useless and be the Rondo we saw in Atlanta, and in that case they lose the deal. But if he's playoff Rondo in the playoffs, that could have a huge impact on the Clippers. If he's able to play make and get assists, but then also be able to attack the rim and kick the ball out, that's something they really, really need. So we'll see if he's able to do that come playoff time. He was really good for the Lakers in the playoffs last year, but hasn't been good in the regular season. Also, if his 3-point shot is falling at just a league average level, then he becomes a much more dangerous player than if he's a non-shooter. And then defensively, he's not great, but he's still a very smart player. Can swipe at the ball, be sort of a pesky defender, so I think he can definitely survive on that end. But if you can get PG and Kawhi more involved, getting downhill, that sort of thing, and then obviously if they face a zone, then Rondo's really good against a zone. He's a smart passer, a very smart player. an experienced player, someone who has championship experience, which is maybe something the Clippers need. If he can be a bit of a leader and a good passer, and he's hitting his shots at an average level, and he's getting into the lane, then it could be a really, really good trade for the Clippers, and it could help them. But if he isn't, I mean, it's not the end of the world. They just gave up Lou Williams, who sort of gets worse in the playoffs, and in 2 seconds, picks don't matter to the Clippers. They have none of them in the next 7 years. Okay, the next trade is between the Nuggets and Cavs. The Nuggets get JaVale McGee, and the Cleveland Cavaliers get Isaiah Hartenstein and 2 second-round picks. So to talk about the Nuggets, they get JaVale McGee, and that fills a big position of need for them, which is backup center. When Jokic isn't, obviously Jokic is going to be playing most of the game, but when he isn't on the floor, they had to play Isaiah Hartenstein. Sometimes they go small ball with JaMychal Green or Paul Millsap. And, it can be okay, but certainly not as good as JaVale McGee, who is a really solid backup center, someone who can protect the rim defensively, and that's also something the Nuggets need, a rim protector, and JaVale can certainly do that. That'll be massive for them. And then offensively, he knows his role. He can set screens, roll to the rim, just that sort of thing. He's also in a playoff series, someone who has 6 fouls. If Jokic gets into foul trouble, you can survive with JaVale McGee playing, 25 minutes a game. But in normal circumstances, just 18 minutes a game, use 3 fouls, protect the rim, get a few alley-oops, that sort of thing. It's something the Nuggets actually really need, and JaVale can play that role perfectly. So if he is committed to the team, and he's JaVale McGee's he's the Shaq Nafool MVP for a reason, but if you can just move past that, be a focused player, be a rim protector, then that could be a really huge addition to the Nuggets. With him and Aaron Gordon coming in, I expect them to be much better defensively. And then for the Cavs, they get Isaiah Hartenstein. They get rid of JaVale McGee, who they're probably going to buy out if they couldn't find a trade for him, and then they get 2 second-round picks. Always a good thing to get more picks. Okay, the next trade is between the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans, with the Mavs getting JJ Redick and Nico Melli, and the Pelicans getting James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and a second-round pick. So for the Mavs, they get 2 shooters to really boost their three-point shooting. They're a pretty average three-point shooting team after the loss of Seth Curry. But they get JJ Redick, who, this season hasn't been great shooting from 3, still about league average, but we know he's a great shooter and someone who could really help the Mavs, both coming off of screens and running around and stressing out the defense, but also spotting up for the shots that Luka can create for him. Luka is such a good passer, but he needs three-point shooters around him and floor spacing, and JJ Redick can definitely provide that. So I like that. And then defensively, they're not a great defensive team anyways. JJ Redick, he's not the greatest defensive player, but he's found ways to survive. If he's guarding the weakest player, it's not the end of the world. So I think that part of it's a good move for the Mavs. And they also get Nico Melli, who's sort of like a sneaky good backup player, a power forward who has a bit of size to him and can really shoot threes. That's something the Mavs could also use, just more three-point shooting. Someone who can come off the bench and replace Maxi Kleber, can come in, hit a few threes, and really swing a game. So I like this move for the Mavericks. And the Pelicans get James Johnson. He's on an expiring contract. Maybe he can help out their culture, get them playing a bit harder on defense. And they get Wes Iwundu and a second-round pick. Sort of just getting off of JJ Redick's contract. They were going to buy him out if they weren't going to trade him. So no real downside for them. He hasn't been great for them this year. And then finally, we have the Chicago Bulls. They're part in a 3-team trade with the Boston Celtics and the Washington Wizards, where they gave up Luke Cornett, Daniel Gafford, and Chandler Hutchinson, and got Daniel Tice and Troy Brown Jr. So I'm just going to talk about the Bull side of this because it doesn't really mean much for the Celtics or the Wizards. I like this move. Obviously, they got Vucevic earlier in the day, and then they get Daniel Tice and Troy Brown Jr., who can be 2 very good backup players. Daniel Tice is a really good backup center. He's a bit undersized, but he's He really plays hard, can attack the rim, can switch a bit on defense. He's also like a really smart player. He does that seal out thing to let players attacking the rim get layups. So Zach LaVine will get like 1 or 2 easy layups just off of that every game. So he can be a really good backup center, and they also need the insurance because they traded 2 first-round picks for Vucevic. If Vucevic goes down, Daniel Tice can be a starting center too, and they can keep their head above water. So I really like that part of it. And then Troy Brown Jr., only 21 years old, hasn't quite worked out for him yet, but you never know. He could be a decent backup small forward for them. And they give up Luke Cornett, Daniel Gafford, and Chandler Hutchinson, who are sort of like young players who are always, on the fringe of the rotation. They're not losing much, and they're getting better right now, adding some good quality bench depth. So those are my thoughts on 5 under-the-radar moves at the trade deadline. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel for more NBA content, and I'll see you guys next time.